when my stepmother slapped me across the face for answering her ringing phone. I tasted copper and assumed it was just another cruelty. Then I saw the text lighting up the screen. It proved that for 7 years, my entire financial existence had been stolen by the people I cooked and cleaned for. They expected me to stay silent at her big gala tonight. They have no idea I have screenshotted every single lie. My name is Adeline Stevens. I am 29 years old, and if you saw me sitting in the driver's seat of my 10-year-old sedan outside the emergency room entrance, you would probably think I looked like a ghost. The Midwest winter had settled in early this year, turning the world into a palette of gray slush and dirty white snow. My heater was rattling, fighting a losing battle against the temperature that had dropped to 10 degrees below zero, but I did not put the car in drive. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel with hands that were dry and cracked from washing them 40 times a shift. I am a nurse at St. Jude's Community Hospital. It is not the glamorous trauma center you see on television dramas where doctors look like models and miracles happen every 14 minutes. It is a place where we are understaffed, overworked, and where the coffee in the break room tastes like battery acid. I had just finished a 14-hour shift, covering for a colleague who had called out sick with the flu. My feet throbbed in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat, and there was a stain on my scrub top that I was fairly certain was bile. Any normal person would be speeding home to a hot shower and a soft bed, but I was not speeding. I was stalling, because going home did not mean going to my small, drafty apartment on the edge of town. It meant going to my father's house. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, vibrating against a hardened fast food wrapper. I did not need to look at the screen to know who it was. It was the family group chat. It was always the family group chat. My mother passed away when I was 19, right when I was starting nursing school. It was an aneurysm, quick and brutal, the kind of death that leaves a house silent and a husband useless. My father, Mark, fell apart. He was a good man once, I think, but grief hollowed him out, and Valerie filled that hollow space with expensive perfume and passive-aggressive demands. They married 2 years later. Valerie, even thinking her name made my stomach tighten. She was a woman who looked beautiful in photos but felt cold to the touch. When she moved in, the dynamic shifted so subtly that I did not notice the noose tightening until I was already choking. I went from being a grieving daughter to the designated fixer. Valerie became the lady of the manor, and I became the staff. I finally looked at the phone. "Dinner is going to be late if you do not hurry." Valerie had typed, no greeting, no question about my day, just a statement of fact that implied a failure on my part. "Your father's blood pressure was up this morning. He needs low sodium tonight." A second message followed. I sighed, my breath clouding in the freezing air of the car. This was my life. I was the invisible backbone of the Stevens family. If I snapped, the whole body would collapse, but nobody ever thought to check if the spine was hurting. I put the car in gear and drove toward the suburbs. The house was a sprawling colonial in a neighborhood where people hired landscapers and judged you by the year of your vehicle. When I pulled into the driveway, I parked off to the side so I would not block Valerie's pristine white SUV. The moment I walked through the door, the warmth of the house hit me, smelling of vanilla candles and pot roast. But I knew better. The pot roast was likely still in its packaging on the counter, waiting for me to season and sear it. "Adeline, is that you?" Valerie's voice floated from the living room. She sounded airy, light, the voice she used when she was browsing magazines or shopping online. "Yes, it is me," I called back, kicking off my wet boots. "Oh, good. Leo needs help with his science project. He is stuck on the hypothesis section." Leo, my half-brother, he was 12 years old. A quiet kid with messy hair and eyes that always looked a little anxious. He was the one thing in this house I did not resent. Valerie treated him like a dress-up doll. She loved him when he won a trophy, or looked handsome in a holiday card, but she had no patience for the messy reality of raising a preteen boy. She did not know he was struggling in math. She did not know he was allergic to strawberries. I was the one who had to remind the school nurse every September. I walked into the kitchen. It was a disaster. Despite the expensive granite countertops, dirty dishes were piled in the sink from breakfast. A carton of milk had been left out, sweating on the island, in the living room. Valerie was lounging on the beige sectional, an iPad in her hand. She was wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my car insurance payment. "You look terrible," she said, glancing up at me briefly before returning her eyes to the screen. "Rough night?" "Short-staffed," I said, walking past her to pick up a discarded coat that belonged to my father. 14 hours. "Well, hard work builds character," she said dismissively. "We need to talk about the gala next month. I need you to coordinate with the florist. The hydrangeas they sent last year were wilting by dessert, and it was humiliating." I paused, holding the coat. "Valerie, I am working 3 night shifts in a row that week." She finally looked at me, her expression sharpening. It was a look I knew well. It was the look that said I was being difficult. "Adeline, this event is for the Heart Association. It is for charity. Your father is on the board. Do you want him to look bad because you are too tired to make a phone call?" There it was, the guilt. It was her primary weapon, and she wielded it with the precision of a surgeon. "I will call them," I said quietly. I went upstairs to find Leo. He was sitting on the floor of his room, surrounded by cardboard and glue. "Hey, buddy," I said, softening my voice. He looked up, relief washing over his face. "Addie, Mom said you would help. I do not get it." I sat down beside him, ignoring the ache in my lower back. For the next hour, I was not a nurse, and I was not a servant. I was a big sister. We worked on his project about plant growth. I explained photosynthesis while my stomach rumbled, empty since lunch. "You are really smart, Addie," Leo said, gluing a leaf onto the board. "Mom says you are lucky you have a job because you do not have the personality for a husband." I froze. My hand hovered over the marker I was holding. It was such a casual cruelty, repeated by a child who did not understand the weight of the words. "Did she say that?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Yeah, she said you are a worker bee, that some people are queens and some are bees." I forced a smile for him. "Well, bees make the honey. Leo, without them, there is no sweetness." Later, downstairs, I started dinner. My father, Mark, wandered in around 6 in the evening. He looked older than his 60 years. His hair was thinning, and he had a permanent stoop to his shoulders. "Hi, princess," he said, kissing my cheek. He smelled of scotch. Just 1 glass, but enough to take the edge off. "Hi, Dad. How is your pressure today?" "Oh, up and down. Valerie says I need to relax more." "Valerie says a lot of things," I muttered, chopping carrots with a little more force than necessary. "She worries about us, Adeline," he said, taking a piece of raw carrot. "She carries a heavy load, managing the social calendar and the house." I looked around the kitchen. I looked at the pile of mail on the counter that I would inevitably have to sort. I looked at the roast I was cooking. I thought about the text I had received 3 days ago from Valerie. "Can you transfer $500 to the joint account? The landscaping bill came early and transfers are pending. I will pay you back next week." She never paid me back. She never did. Last month, it was my father's prescription refill. "The pharmacy does not have my new card on file. Adeline, just cover it and we will settle up." She had texted. That was $80. 2 weeks before that, it was Leo's hockey fees. "I am at the rink and forgot my checkbook. Can you Venmo the coach? It is $300. I made a decent salary as a nurse, but I had 0 savings. Every time I managed to put away a few $100s, an emergency arose in the Stevens household. My car needed new brakes, but I was driving on metal because Valerie needed a deposit for a venue. I was wearing scrubs with a fraying hem because my father needed a specific organic supplement that insurance did not cover. "Dad," I said, putting the knife down, "about the car insurance bill you sent me." He waved a hand. "Oh, handle that for me, will you? The accountant is moving things around. Liquid assets are a bit tight this month." "It is 6 months of premiums. Dad, it is $1,200. "We are family," Adeline, he said, his voice taking on a pitiful edge. What is mine is yours. Eventually. You know that. Why do you have to count pennies with your own father? Because I am drowning. I wanted to scream. Because I am 29 and I still live in a studio apartment because I am funding your wife's delusions of grandeur. But I did not scream. I picked up the knife and went back to the carrots. I will take care of it, I said. Dinner was a performance. Valerie held court, talking about the upcoming gala, about which local socialite had gained weight, about how hard it was to find good help these days. I ate quickly, my eyes on my plate. I was the help she was complaining about, but she said it right in front of me, as if I were part of the furniture. Adeline, don't forget to take the trash out when you leave, Valerie said as she finished her wine. And the recycling goes out tomorrow morning, so maybe you can pull the bin to the curb. I have to go, Valerie. I have to be back at the hospital at 7 in the morning. It will take 2 minutes, she snapped. God, you act like we are asking you to build a pyramid. We gave you a home. We paid for your college. That was the trump card. They had paid for 2 years of my college. I took out loans for the rest. But in their narrative, they had bestowed a career upon me, and I owed them a life debt. I cleared the table, I loaded the dishwasher, I wiped the counters, I took out the trash, I dragged the heavy recycling bin down the long, icy driveway, slipping once and bruising my knee on the asphalt. When I finally got back into my car, it was 9 at night. The cold had seeped into the upholstery, making the seat feel like a block of ice. I sat there for a moment, my hands shaking, not from the temperature, but from a bone-deep exhaustion that sleep would not fix. I pulled up my banking app on my phone. Balance, $42.15. I had been paid 2 days ago, but the car insurance, the groceries I just bought for their dinner, and the gas to get here had eaten it all. I looked at the house. The lights were warm and inviting. I could see Valerie's silhouette in the window, holding a glass of wine, probably laughing at something on the television. My father was safe. Leo was helped. The house was clean. I had done my job. I was the good daughter. I was the reliable one. I was the one who fixed things. But as I put the key in the ignition, a thought drifted through my mind, unbidden and terrifying. I tried to remember the last time I had done something just for me. Not a necessity like sleeping or eating, but something purely for my own joy. A movie, a dress, a lazy Sunday morning with a book. I searched my memory, scanning back through the weeks, the months, the years. I looked back to before nursing school, before Valerie, before Mom died. I sat in the dark, freezing car, and I realized with a jolt of horror that I could not remember. The memory simply was not there. My life had become a series of transactions for other people's comfort, and I was the currency they were spending. I drove home in silence, the radio off, the darkness of the road stretching out before me like a tunnel with no light at the end. I did not know it then, but the breaking point was coming. The invisible backbone was developing a fracture, and soon it would snap. But for tonight, I just drove, wondering how much longer a person could disappear into the background before they ceased to exist entirely. The vibration of my phone against the metal bench of the locker room felt like a physical intrusion. I had just finished my third 12-hour shift in a row. My eyes felt like they were filled with sand, and my lower back was a solid knot of tension. I wanted nothing more than to drive home, crawl into bed, and sleep for 18 hours. But the phone kept buzzing. It was the family group chat again. I picked it up, squinting against the harsh fluorescent lights of the break room. The message was from Valerie. We need to finalize the plan for your father's 60th birthday party this Saturday. I looked at the catering quotes, and they are ridiculous. It makes much more sense for you to handle the food. You do it faster than them anyway, and your father prefers home cooking. I need appetizers for 40 people and a 3-course dinner for 20. I stared at the screen. My brain was foggy from exhaustion, but the request cut through the haze like a knife. Saturday was 5 days away. I was scheduled to work Friday night and Saturday morning. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I usually just typed, "okay," and figured out how to survive later. That was the pattern. That was the rule. But today, the exhaustion was too deep. I physically could not imagine standing in a kitchen for 10 hours after standing in an emergency room for 12. I typed a response, my thumbs moving slowly. Valerie, I am working this weekend. I have shifts on Friday and Saturday. I physically cannot cook for 60 people. We should hire the caterer. I hit send and held my breath. The response came 10 seconds later. Oh, I did not realize you were too busy for your father's milestone birthday. I guess I will tell him you cannot make time. It is just sad. Family is more important than work. Adeline, maybe if you managed your schedule better, you would not be so tired. She added a smiley face emoji at the end, the yellow face with the closed eyes and the polite smile. It felt like a slap. My blood pressure spiked. I could feel the heat rising in my neck. Managed my schedule better? I was working overtime to pay for the car repairs that I could not afford because I had paid their landscaping bill. Before I could type a defensive reply, a private message popped up from my father. Adeline, please, Valerie is really stressed about this party. She wants it to be perfect for me. You are the only one she relies on. Do not let her down. Do not make this difficult. I lowered the phone, my hand trembling. Do not make this difficult. That was the family motto. Adeline, do not make this difficult. Adeline, just sign the check. Adeline, just drive the car. Adeline, just cook the food. A memory washed over me. So vivid, it made me nauseous. 2 years ago, Valerie had chaired a fundraiser for the local animal shelter. She had volunteered to provide a gourmet buffet for 70 donors, but she had not hired a chef. She had volunteered me. I had taken 3 vacation days. I had spent $700 of my own money on ingredients because Valerie said the shelter's budget was tight. I had spent 72 hours chopping, sautéing, and plating. I had burned my arm on a sheet pan of roasted vegetables, a scar I still had on my forearm. On the night of the event, I was in the back kitchen of the community center, sweating through my dress, scrubbing heavy pots because the venue did not have a dishwasher. Through the swinging doors, I heard the applause. And a special thank you to our vice president, Valerie Stevens, the shelter director had said into the microphone, who personally oversaw this incredible menu, a woman of taste and talent. I had peeked through the window. Valerie was on stage, holding a bouquet of red roses, dabbing at her dry eyes, looking humble and gracious. She did not mention me. She did not even look toward the kitchen. When I drove her and Dad home later that night, she complained that the salmon was a little dry. I looked down at my phone again. The text from my father was still there. Do not let her down. For the first time in my life, I did not just feel sad. I felt a cold, hard knot of anger. It was a new sensation, heavy and solid in my chest. I did not reply. Instead, I pressed the side buttons on my phone. Click. I took a screenshot of Valerie's text. Then I took a screenshot of my father's text. I did not know why I did it. I was not planning a lawsuit. I was not planning a war. I think I just wanted proof. I wanted to look at these images later, when the gaslighting started, and remind myself that I was not crazy. They really were this cruel. I changed out of my scrubs and drove straight to my father's house. I needed to say this to their faces. I could not do it over text. When I arrived, the house was buzzing with activity. A decorator was hanging gold and silver streamers in the foyer. Valerie was directing him, pointing a manicured finger at the chandelier. No, lower, she said. It needs to cascade, like a waterfall. She saw me enter and clapped her hands. Adeline, finally, the decorator needs check number 2, and my checkbook is upstairs. Can you just write him a check for $500? I will transfer it to you tomorrow. I stopped in the doorway. The air in the house was warm, but I felt freezing. No, I said. The decorator stopped moving. Valerie turned slowly, her eyebrows arching. Excuse me? I said no, I repeated, my voice shaking slightly. I do not have $500. Valerie, my account is overdrawn from the grocery run last week. It was a lie. I had $40, but it felt good to say it. Valerie's face tightened. She looked at the decorator and forced a laugh. Oh, these kids. They spend money on latte art and then cry poverty. Give us a moment, would you? She walked over to me, grabbing my elbow and steering me into the dining room. Her grip was tight, her nails digging into my skin through my coat. Do not embarrass me in front of the help, she hissed. Write the check. Your father will cover it. Dad hasn't covered the last 3 checks, I said. And I am not cooking for the party. Valerie, I told you, I have to work. Valerie stared at me. For a second, I saw pure, unfiltered rage in her eyes. It was not the look of a mother, or even a stepmother. It was the look of a manager dealing with a disobedient employee. Then, the mask slipped back on. She sighed, a long, tragic sound. Fine, if you want to ruin your father's 60th, that is on you. I will order pizzas or something cheap. I hope you are happy knowing he will be ashamed. He likes pizza, I said, though I knew it was weak. We need to discuss the seating chart, she said, pivoting instantly as if the money conversation had never happened. She walked over to the dining table, where a large diagram of the room was spread out. We have 60 guests, she said, tapping the paper. The mayor is coming, and 2 of the partners from your father's firm. This is the head table. I looked at the diagram. The head table was a long rectangle at the front. There were 6 seats. Dad, you, the partners, I counted. And Leo? Leo is sitting with his cousins at table 4, she said. The head table is for the adults and the VIPs. Okay, I said. So where am I sitting? I scanned the main tables. I saw my aunt's name. I saw the neighbors. I did not see Adeline. Valerie cleared her throat. She picked up a pen and pointed to a small circle near the back of the room, right next to the swinging doors of the kitchen service entrance. We are putting a small table here, she said. I squinted. That is the service station. That is where the waiters stack the dirty plates. Well, we are tight on space, Adeline, she said, her voice breezy. And honestly, since you refuse to cook, I assumed you would at least be helping manage the flow of service. You know how you are. You like to be helpful. You do not really fit in with the partners' wives. They talk about investments and travel. You would be bored. I stared at the spot she was pointing to. It was not even a guest table. It was a vendor table. It was where you put the DJ or the photographer so they could eat a cold sandwich while everyone else had steak. I am his daughter, I said. The words tasted like ash. It is his 60th birthday, and you are sitting me by the kitchen door? Oh, stop being dramatic, Valerie snapped. You are almost 30 years old. Stop acting like a child who needs a high chair next to Daddy. We need the seats at the main table for people who can actually help your father's career. The partners are thinking of buying him out next year. This is business. Adeline, try to be an adult about it. I looked up at the ceiling, blinking back tears. It was not the sadness of a child anymore. It was the humiliation of a woman who had just realized exactly what she was worth. Does Dad know? I asked. Mark agrees with me, she said instantly. He thinks you would be more comfortable where you are not under pressure to make conversation. At that moment, my father walked into the room. He was wearing his golf sweater, looking flushed and happy. Hey, Addie, he beamed. Valerie tell you about the band? We got that jazz trio. I looked at him. I looked at the man whose blood pressure medication I paid for last month. I looked at the man whose hand I held when Mom died. Dad, I said, my voice steady. Valerie says I am sitting at the service table near the kitchen. Is that true? Mark froze. He looked at Valerie, then at me, then at the floor. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Well, sweetheart, he started, his voice dropping to that mumbling tone he used when he was avoiding conflict. You know how crowded the room is, and Val thought, well, she thought you might want to keep an eye on things. Make sure the food comes out hot. Since you are not cooking, it is a way to contribute. My heart stopped. It actually stopped beating for a second. He knew. He agreed. To them, I was not a guest. I was not family. I was staff. I was a resource to be managed. If I was not cooking the food, I was expected to supervise the service of it. "I am a guest, Dad," I whispered. "I am your daughter." "Of course you are," he said, too loud, too fake. "But you are also, you are good at the details. We just want the night to run smoothly. Don't be sensitive." Don't be sensitive. The anger in my chest hardened into something cold and heavy, like a stone. "I see," I said. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I simply pulled my phone out of my pocket. "What are you doing?" Valerie asked, eyeing the device. "Just checking my schedule," I lied. But I was not checking my schedule. I was opening the voice memo app. I hit the red record button and slipped the phone back into my pocket, the microphone facing out. "So," I said, looking at both of them. "To clarify, I am not allowed at the family table. I am expected to sit by the kitchen door to supervise the catering staff, and this is because I refuse to cook for 60 people after working a 36-hour week. Is that correct?" Valerie rolled her eyes. "You make it sound so ugly. We are just asking you to pitch in. God, Adeline, why do you always have to make everything about you? It is your father's day." "Right," I said. "My mistake." I felt the phone buzzing against my hip. A phantom notification? No, it was just the recording running, capturing every word. "So we can count on you to handle the check for the decorator?" Valerie pressed, sensing my resignation. I really do not want to walk upstairs. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had slowly, methodically stripped my father of his spine and was now trying to strip me of my dignity. "I will see what I can do," I said. It was non-committal. It was vague. "Good," she said, dismissing me with a wave of her hand. "Now move your car. You are blocking the driveway and the florist is coming in 10 minutes. I walked out of the house. The cold air hit my face, drying the tears that I had refused to let fall. I got into my car, but I did not start the engine immediately. I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording. I saved the file. I named it Birthday Meeting, Seating Chart. Then I opened the folder where I had saved the screenshots of the texts. I moved the audio file into the same folder. I sat there for a moment, staring at the file names. I felt sick. I felt hollow. But beneath the nausea, there was a new clarity. They did not love me. It was a terrifying thought, a thought that shattered the foundation of my entire life. They did not love me. They used me. There was a difference. You do not ask people you love to sit by the kitchen door. You do not ask people you love to bankrupt themselves for your streamers. I started the car. The engine groaned, protesting the cold. I had always thought that if I just worked harder, if I just gave more, if I just sacrificed enough, they would finally see me. I thought I could earn my way back into the family. But as I pulled away from the curb, watching the house disappear in my rearview mirror, I realized the truth. I was never in the family. I was just the help. And the help had just started keeping receipts. My phone buzzed again, another text from Valerie. "Don't forget to pick up your brother from practice on your way home. It is out of your way, but I am busy with the florist." I looked at the message, then I looked at the road ahead. I turned the blinker on. I would pick up Leo. I would always pick up Leo. He was the innocent in this war. But as for the rest of them? I gripped the steering wheel tight. The party was in 5 days. They wanted me to be the invisible manager? Fine, I would be invisible. I would be so invisible they would not see what was coming until it was too late. The good daughter died in that dining room. Somewhere between the seating chart and the checkbook, the woman driving the car now was someone else entirely. And she was done paying the bill. The morning of the party arrived with the subtlety of a freight train. By 10 in the morning, my father's house had been transformed into a chaotic staging ground for what was supposed to be the social event of the season. I was not supposed to be there. I had told myself I would arrive 5 minutes before the guests, sit at my designated table by the kitchen door, and leave the moment the cake was cut. But at 8 in the morning, my phone had rung. It was my father. He could not find his cufflinks. He was panicking. His blood pressure was rising. He sounded so small. So helpless. So, like the fool I was, I drove over. When I walked into the kitchen, the air was thick with the smell of roasting garlic and the frantic energy of hired help. Valerie had decided to hire a catering team after all, claiming she found room in the budget, but she was micromanaging them into an early grave. She was shouting orders about the placement of the shrimp cocktail while a young server looked on, terrified. I found the cufflinks in 5 minutes. They were exactly where they always were, in the velvet box in the top drawer. I should have left then, but the head caterer needed someone to sign for the ice delivery because Valerie was busy screaming at the florist, and Dad was hiding in his study. So I signed. Then I helped Leo tie his tie because nobody else had noticed he was struggling with it. Then I started organizing the recycling because the bins were overflowing again. By noon, I was standing at the kitchen island, trapped. My own phone was pressed to my ear. I was on a call with Dr. Evans from the hospital. We had a patient, Mrs. Gable, whose vitals were crashing, and the covering nurse needed my input on her medication history because the digital charts were down for maintenance. "I can barely hear you." "Adeline," Dr. Evans said, his voice crackling with static. "Did you say the dosage was 50 milligrams or 15? 50, I said, plugging my other ear with a finger. 50. She has a high tolerance. Doctor, wait, hold on. The noise in the kitchen was deafening, but cutting through the clatter of silverware and the caterer shouting was a ringtone. It was loud, piercing, and relentless. It was Valerie's phone. It was sitting right next to my elbow on the marble countertop. The screen flashed, unknown caller. It rang and rang. Valerie was nowhere to be seen. She was likely out on the patio yelling about the heat lamps. "Adeline?" Dr. Evans asked. "Are you there?" "I am here," I said, frustration bubbling up. "I am sorry, there is just a lot of noise." Valerie's phone stopped ringing. Then, 2 seconds later, it started again. The same shrill, demanding tone. It was vibrating against the granite, creating a buzzing drill sound that went straight to my temples. I looked around. No Valerie. The catering staff was busy plating appetizers. I just wanted it to stop. I needed to hear the doctor. It was a reflex, born of a decade of being the personal assistant to this house. I reached out and swiped the green button. "Hello?" I said into Valerie's phone, holding it a few inches from my face while keeping my own phone pressed to my ear. "Valerie is unavailable right now. Can I take a message?" I expected a telemarketer. I expected a florist. I expected a guest canceling last minute. I did not expect the crisp, dry voice of a woman on the other end. "This is the office of Attorney Sterling," the woman said. "We are calling with an urgent update regarding the guardianship filing. We need Mrs. Stevens to sign the affidavit regarding the incapacity of the ward before the court date on Monday." I froze. The kitchen noise seemed to drop away, sucked into a vacuum of sudden, terrified silence. "Guardianship?" I whispered, lowering my own phone. Dr. Evans was still talking in my left ear, but I could no longer hear him. "What ward?" "The ward," the woman said, sounding impatient. "The petition for Adeline Stevens. We also have the paperwork ready for the transfer of the Hayes Trust assets once the guardianship is approved. Is this Mrs. Stevens?" The world tilted on its axis. Adeline Stevens, that was me. Guardianship, that was a legal mechanism used for the elderly, the infirm, or the severely mentally ill. It stripped a person of their rights to manage their own money, their own medical care, their own life. It placed them under the total control of a guardian. My voice failed. I stood there, clutching the phone, my brain trying to process the impossible words. Transfer of the Hayes Trust. I did not even know a Hayes Trust existed. Grandma Hayes had died 10 years ago. I thought she left everything to charity. Suddenly, the kitchen door slammed open. Valerie swept in. Her face flushed from the cold outside. She stopped dead when she saw me. Her eyes locked onto the phone in my hand. For a split second, she looked terrified. Then, the terror twisted into something ugly and violent. "What do you think you are doing?" she shrieked. She crossed the kitchen in 3 long strides. I was still paralyzed, the woman on the line saying something I could not hear. Valerie did not ask for the phone. She lunged. She snatched the device from my hand with such force that her fingernails scratched deep into my palm. But she did not stop there. The momentum carried her forward, or perhaps it was pure, unadulterated rage. Her other hand came up and struck me across the face. It was not a slap. It was an open-handed blow, hard and heavy. The sound was like a gunshot in the crowded kitchen. My head snapped to the side. The force of it threw me off balance. I stumbled backward, my hip catching the sharp edge of the granite island. Pain exploded in my side, and I grabbed the counter to keep from falling to the floor. "You little sneak!" Valerie screamed, her face contorted. "How dare you touch my property? How dare you spy on me?" The room went dead silent. I tasted blood. My lip had split against my teeth. A drop of red fell onto the white front of my coat. I looked up. The catering staff, 3 young men and a woman holding a tray of puff pastries, were staring at us. Their mouths were open. They had just watched the lady of the house assault a guest. Assault her stepdaughter. My face burned. It was a heat that started in my cheek and consumed my entire body. It was the humiliation of a child being disciplined. But I was 29 years old. I was a professional. I saved lives for a living. And I was standing in my father's kitchen, tasting my own blood because I had answered a phone. I stammered, my hand going to my cheek. They said guardianship." Valerie's eyes went wide. She clutched the phone to her chest, breathing hard. "You are hysterical," she hissed. "Get out. You are ruining everything. You are having one of your episodes." Episodes. I had never had an episode in my life. But then I saw it. Valerie had not locked the phone. In her haste to grab it, she had not hit the sleep button. The screen was still illuminated, shining bright in her hand, because she was holding it against her chest, facing me. I could see the message notification that had just popped up, likely from the lawyer who had just hung up. My vision tunneled. The adrenaline gave me a strange, hyper-focused clarity. I could read the text as if it were projected on a movie screen. The first message was from a contact saved as Sterling Legal. "When the court approves, she lacks financial capacity. The remaining funds in the Hayes Trust will legally transfer to the guardians for management. We are looking at nearly $200,000. $200,000. My knees felt weak. Grandma Hayes had left me money. Real money. Money that could have paid off my student loans. Money that could have bought me a house. Money that could have given me freedom. And they were stealing it. No, not stealing it. That would be too simple. They were erasing me to get it." Another message popped up below it. "Make sure you keep the receipts where she pays Mark's bills. We need to frame that as reckless spending. It proves she cannot manage her own assets and gives them away compulsively." The air left my lungs. I stared at the words, reckless spending. The car insurance, the pharmacy bills, the hockey equipment, the groceries, the catering deposit I almost paid. Every time I had helped them, I had handed them a weapon. Every time I transferred money to save my father from embarrassment, they had printed the receipt and put it in a file marked evidence of insanity. They were not just using me for money. They were building a legal cage around me. They were going to go to a judge, show him a list of transactions where I emptied my bank account for unknown reasons, and argue that I was mentally unstable. They were going to take my freedom, my autonomy, and my name, just to get their hands on a trust fund I did not even know belonged to me. "Get out!" Valerie screamed again, pointing a trembling finger at the back door. "Go home and take your medication. I will not let you ruin your father's night with your drama." She was acting. She was already playing the role for the witnesses. She was painting the picture of the unstable stepdaughter attacking the poor, besieged mother. I looked at the catering staff. The woman with the pastries looked down, terrified to make eye contact. I looked at Valerie. For the first time, I did not see the intimidating, glamorous woman who controlled my life. I saw a thief. I saw a predator. My cheek throbbed. The metallic taste of blood was heavy on my tongue. I wanted to scream. I wanted to lung for the phone and show everyone the texts. I wanted to flip the tray of pastries and burn the house down. But a voice inside me spoke up. It was not the voice of the scared little girl who wanted to be loved. It was a new voice, cold, detached, surgical. "They are using your kindness to kill you," the voice said. "If you scream now, you prove them right. If you fight back now, you are the violent one. If you break down now, you are the unstable one." I slowly took my hand away from my face. I looked at the blood on my fingertips. "Okay," I said. My voice was terrifyingly calm. It did not sound like me. Valerie blinked, surprised by my lack of tears. "I will go," I said. I did not look at my father, who I knew was hiding in the hallway, listening. I knew he was there. I could smell his aftershave. He had heard the slap. He had heard the scream, and he had stayed in the shadows. That hurt more than the blow. He was not just a victim of her manipulation. He was an accomplice to my execution. I turned around. I walked past the silent catering staff. I picked up my purse from the counter. I walked out the back door into the biting cold of the winter afternoon. The wind hit my face, stinging the open cut on my lip. I walked to my car. I got in. I locked the doors. I did not start the engine immediately. I sat there, shaking, not from fear, from a rage so pure and white-hot that I felt like I could melt the steering wheel. I pulled out my own phone. My hand was trembling, but I forced it to be steady. I opened the Notes app. I typed everything I had just seen. Sterling Legal, guardianship petition, Hayes Trust, $200,000, reckless spending strategy. I wiped the blood from my lip with the back of my hand. I looked at the smear of red on my skin. They wanted to prove I was incompetent? They wanted to prove I was a liability? They had made a fatal error. They thought they were kicking a dog that would just whimper and crawl back for scraps. They forgot that I was a nurse. I dealt with trauma every day. I knew how to stop bleeding. I knew how to document injuries, and I knew how to wait for the right moment to pull the plug. I started the car. The engine roared to life. "Happy birthday, Dad," I whispered to the empty air. I put the car in reverse. I was leaving the house, but I was not retreating. I was going to war. And unlike them, I had the one thing they never thought I was capable of. I had the truth, and I was done being nice. The silence in my apartment was usually a comfort, but tonight it felt like the hush of a crime scene. I sat at my small, scratched dining table, a bag of frozen peas pressed against my throbbing lip. The mirror in the bathroom had confirmed what my tongue had already told me. My lip was split, swollen to twice its normal size, and turning a violent shade of purple. I had not cried since I drove away from my father's house. The time for tears had passed somewhere on the highway between the suburbs and the city. Now, I was operating on a different fuel source entirely. It was a cold, clinical focus, the same kind I used when a patient was crashing and I had to filter out the panic to find the vein. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim room, casting harsh shadows on the walls. I logged into my bank account. My finger hovered over the trackpad for a moment, trembling slightly, before I clicked on the search bar. I typed in the word transfer. The list that populated was so long I had to scroll and scroll and scroll. I had always known I helped my family. I knew I covered bills. I knew I was the safety net. But seeing it laid out in black and white, column after column of red numbers, was a physical blow. October 12th, $500 to Mark Stevens. Memo. Pharmacy copay. September 4th, $350 to Valerie Stevens. Memo. Leo's tutor. August 1st, $1,200 to S&S Landscaping. Memo. House maintenance. I opened a spreadsheet. I had never been good with spreadsheets. Valerie always said I did not have a head for business. But tonight, I was learning fast. I started a new column. Date, amount, alleged reason, actual reason. I went back 3 years. That was as far as the digital records went. I typed in every single transaction. July 2022, $4,000. That was the time Valerie said Dad needed emergency dental surgery that insurance would not cover. I remembered draining my savings account for that. I remembered eating instant noodles for a month. I paused, my hands freezing over the keyboard. I opened a new tab and logged into my father's insurance portal. I had his password because I was the one who filed all his claims. I searched for dental claims in July of 2022. There were none. I searched for August, September, nothing. My heart hammered against my ribs. I went back to the bank statement. Where did the money go? I looked at the routing number on the canceled check image. It was not a dental office. It was a generic LLC called VS Designs. VS Valerie Stevens. She had not sent the money to a dentist. She had sent it to herself. I felt bile rise in my throat. I forced it down. I kept typing. By the time I finished entering the data for the last 3 years, the total at the bottom of the spreadsheet was staggering. It was over $45,000. $45,000. That was a down payment on a house. That was a new car. That was a master's degree. I had given them everything I had, piece by piece, thinking I was keeping my father alive, thinking I was helping my little brother, but I was just funding Valerie's shell company. But the text message I had seen on Valerie's phone earlier that day was about something much bigger than $45,000. It was about the Hayes Trust. I stood up and walked to my bedroom closet. On the top shelf, behind a stack of old winter blankets, was a battered cardboard box. It was the only thing I had left of my mother's. Inside were her journals, some photo albums, and a file of legal documents she had kept for me. I pulled the box down, dust motes dancing in the air. I sat on the floor and opened it. The smell of lavender and old paper wafted up. My mother's scent. I pushed past the grief and dug for the manila envelope at the bottom. Hayes Estate. Copies was written in my mother's looping handwriting. I pulled out the documents. These were photocopies of my grandmother's will. Dated 12 years ago. Grandma Hayes had been a stern woman, but she valued education above all else. I scanned the pages until I found the section on the trust. I hereby establish the Hayes Education and Welfare Trust for the benefit of my granddaughter, Adeline Marie Stevens. The principal sum of $150,000 is to be invested conservatively. The beneficiary may access funds for higher education. The remaining principal and interest shall be released to the beneficiary in full upon her 30th birthday, provided she is of sound mind and independent standing. I read the number again. $150,000. And that was 12 years ago. I grabbed my phone and opened the calculator app. If that money had been sitting in a standard index fund, growing at an average of 7% a year, I punched in the numbers, compound interest, 12 years. The number on the screen made me gasp. It should be worth nearly $340,000 today. I leaned back against the bed frame, the paper trembling in my hand. When I was 22, finishing nursing school, I had asked my father about the trust. I wanted to pay off my loans. I closed my eyes, remembering the conversation. We were in the kitchen. Valerie was there, chopping vegetables. "Oh, Addie," Dad had said, looking pained. "The market crashed. Honey, the investments your grandmother chose, they were bad. We had to use what was left to pay for your mother's hospital bills before she died. It is gone. I am so sorry." I had believed him. Why would I not believe him? He was my father. He was crying. But reading the will now, I saw a clause I had missed before. The funds are protected from any debts or liabilities of the parents or guardians. They could not have used it for Mom's bills. It was legally impossible. So where was the money? I went back to the laptop. I needed to find the trail. If the money was gone, there had to be a record of where it went, but I did not have access to the trust accounts. Or did I? I started searching through my email, my current email, but the old Hotmail account I had used in college, I searched for Hayes, Trust, Bank. Nothing. Then, I tried something different. I searched for my father's email address. Hundreds of results appeared, mostly forwards, jokes, reminders about dinner, but buried in a chain from 4 years ago, there was an attachment. It was a PDF of a loan application for a luxury SUV, Valerie's white Mercedes. I opened the PDF. I scrolled down to the signature page. There, on the line for cosigner, was a signature. Adeline M. Stevens. I stared at it. It looked like my signature. The A had the same slant. The S looped in a similar way, but the tail of the Y was wrong. I always curled it up. This one went straight down. I had never co-signed for a Mercedes. I was driving a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a rusted bumper. I looked at the date, June 4th, 2021. I checked my digital calendar. On June 4th, 2021, I was working a double shift. I was physically in the hospital from 7 in the morning until 11 at night. I could not have been at a car dealership signing papers. They had forged my signature. My father, a man who used to read me bedtime stories, had forged my name to buy his wife a $70,000 car. But it got worse. In the same email chain, I noticed the recipients. The email was sent from the dealership to my father, but it was carbon copied to another address, Adeline Stevens, trust@gmail.com. I stared at the address. I had never created that account. I opened a new browser window. I typed in the address. I tried to log in. Obviously not knowing the password, I clicked Forgot Password. Enter the last 4 digits of the phone number associated with this account. I typed in the last 4 digits of my phone number. Incorrect. I typed in the last 4 digits of my father's number. Incorrect. I typed in the last 4 digits of Valerie's number. A verification code has been sent to the number ending in 8892. Valerie's number. I sat back, the air hissing out of my lungs. They had created a fake email address in my name. They were using it to approve transactions, to receive statements, to communicate with banks. They had built a digital ghost of me. I looked at the text message I had transcribed from the kitchen earlier. Make sure you keep the receipts where she pays Mark's bills. We need to frame that as reckless spending. Suddenly, the pieces slammed together in my mind, forming a picture so grotesque I wanted to look away. They were not just stealing, they were setting a trap. By forging my signature on loans I could not afford, they were ruining my credit score. By making me pay their bills, they were draining my legitimate bank account to zero. By controlling the fake email, they could accept notifications that I never saw. And now, the end game. They were going to go to a judge. They were going to show the court that Adeline Stevens had co-signed for luxury cars she could not pay for. They were going to show that Adeline Stevens emptied her bank account every month to pay for random expenses. They were going to show that Adeline Stevens had no savings, despite working full-time. They were building a profile of a woman who was financially incompetent, a woman who was manic, a woman who needed a guardian. And once they had guardianship, the remaining funds in the Hayes Trust will legally transfer to the guardians for management. The $300,000, they could not touch it while it was in the trust, but if they became my guardians, they gained control of my assets. They could drain it legally. Oh my God, I whispered into the empty room. It was not just greed, it was predation. They had spent 10 years grooming me to be the perfect victim. They had trained me to say yes, to sign things without reading, to hand over my money. And now that I was turning 30, the age when the trust was supposed to unlock for me, they were panicking. They had to incapacitate me before I got the key. I looked at the pile of papers on my floor, the old will, the bank statements, the forged loan. I felt a wave of nausea, but I pushed it down. I did not have time to be sick. I was in a burning building, and I had to find the exit. I reached for my external hard drive. I plugged it in. I created a new folder. I named it Family. Then I paused. I deleted the name. I renamed it Evidence. I started scanning everything. I used my phone to take high-resolution photos of the will. I downloaded every bank statement from the last 7 years. I took screenshots of the fake email login page showing Valerie's number. I downloaded the PDF of the forged car loan. I went through my text history with Valerie. I screenshotted every request for money. Dad needs this. Transfer this. Don't be selfish. I took screenshots of my responses. I can't afford this. This is my rent money. I organized them by date. I added notes. Nov 2023. Forced to pay utilities. Jan 2024. Guilt-tripped into paying country club fees. I worked for 4 hours. The sun had gone down, and the streetlights outside were casting long, orange beams across my floor. My eyes burned. My lip throbbed. But as the folder grew, so did my confidence. They thought I was chaotic. They thought I was emotional. They relied on the narrative that I was the messy, ungrateful daughter. But looking at this folder, at the cold, hard data, the narrative shifted. This was not the profile of a crazy woman. This was the profile of a systematic financial abuse victim. I uploaded the entire evidence folder to a secure cloud storage service. I created a password that was a random string of 30 characters. I enabled two-factor authentication. Then, I sent a copy of the link to a burner email address I had created years ago for online shopping, just in case they compromised my main account. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. For years, I had wondered why I never felt good enough. Why? No matter how much I gave, the hole in my family never filled up. Now I knew it was never a hole. It was a vacuum. I touched the bandage on my lip. Valerie had made a mistake when she slapped me. She thought pain would make me submit. She thought humiliation would make me small. She forgot that I was a nurse. I knew that pain was just a signal. It told you where the injury was. It told you what needed to be fixed. And now, I knew exactly what needed to be fixed. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, in the big house on the hill, Valerie and Mark were probably sleeping soundly, confident that their plan was in motion. They thought they had won. They thought the guardianship was a done deal. I pressed my hand against the cold glass. "You should have just hired a caterer," I whispered. The investigation was over. The evidence was secured. Now, I needed allies. I needed someone who knew the law as well as Valerie thought she did. I turned away from the window. I was done being the daughter. Tomorrow, I would become the plaintiff. The glass door of the law office said Alvarez and Associates, in simple, peeling gold letters. It was located in a strip mall next to a dry cleaner and a falafel shop, a stark contrast to the marble-floored, high-rise firm where Valerie's lawyers worked. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, clutching the steering wheel, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I kept checking my rearview mirror, irrational terror seizing me that Valerie's white SUV would pull up behind me, blocking me in. But nobody came. It was just me, the gray winter sky, and the folder of evidence burning a hole in my passenger seat. I walked in. The receptionist was a young man with bright blue hair, who smiled at me without a hint of judgment when he saw the bruised swelling on my lip. "I have an appointment with Mrs. Alvarez," I whispered. "I am Adeline." Maria Alvarez was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes framed by red glasses and a desk cluttered with files. She did not offer me tea or small talk. She gestured to the chair opposite her and waited. I opened my laptop. I felt like I was handing over a diary, something shameful and private. I showed her the spreadsheet. I showed her the forged car loan. I showed her the text messages about the guardianship. Mrs. Alvarez watched the screen in silence. She put on her glasses, then took them off, then put them back on. For 20 minutes, the only sound in the room was the clicking of her mouse and the hum of the electric heater in the corner. Finally, she leaned back. She looked at me, and her expression was not one of pity. It was the look a mechanic gives a car that has been driven into the ground. "Adeline," she said, her voice raspy and direct, "you came here asking for a consultation about a family dispute. I need to be very clear with you. This is not a dispute. This is a systematic dismantling of your legal personhood." I swallowed hard. Hearing a stranger say, it made it real in a way that my late-night panic attacks never did. "They are preparing a case for incompetence," she continued. tapping a finger on the printout of the guardianship text. They are building a narrative that you are financially reckless and emotionally unstable. If they get a judge to sign off on an emergency temporary guardianship, they can freeze your assets, including that trust fund, within 48 hours. Can they do that? I asked, my voice trembling. I am a nurse. I have a job. I pay my taxes. They can try, Alvarez said. And if you do not have a defense ready, they might succeed. Family courts can be manipulated, especially if one side has expensive lawyers and the other side, you, has a history of being compliant. She opened a drawer and pulled out a notepad. We are going to stop them, she said, but we need to build a firewall. First, I am taking this case. We will work out a payment plan later, but I need to file a notice of representation immediately, so they cannot talk to you without going through me. Second, you need a doctor. I work with doctors, I said. Not that kind, she corrected. You need a forensic psychologist. I have a colleague, Dr. Russo. You need to see him this week. We need a professional evaluation stating clearly that you are of sound mind, capable of managing your affairs, and suffering from zero cognitive deficits. We need a paper shield that says you are sane, Adeline, because they are going to spend a lot of money trying to prove you are crazy. Walking out of her office an hour later, I felt lighter. The fear was still there, but it was different. It was no longer the fear of a child in the dark. It was the fear of a soldier before a battle. I had a general now. 2 days later, I was sitting on a soft beige couch in Dr. Russo's office. He was a quiet man with a beard and a way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. Tell me about the first time you felt you had to buy your family's affection, he asked gently. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to say that I did not buy affection, that I was just being a good daughter, but the words died in my throat. I told him about the first Christmas after Mom died. Valerie had cried because she wanted a specific, expensive crystal vase, and Dad had looked at me with those sad, pleading eyes. I had spent my entire tuition savings for the next semester to buy it. Valerie had stopped crying. Dad had hugged me. For 5 minutes. The house had felt peaceful. I told him about the time I drove through a blizzard to deliver a forgotten tuxedo for Dad, spinning out into a ditch. And when I finally arrived, shaking and freezing, Valerie just checked the suit for wrinkles and did not ask if I was hurt. I told him about the guilt, the heavy, suffocating blanket of guilt that woke me up at 3 a.m, telling me I was selfish, I was ungrateful, I was taking up too much space. Dr. Russo took notes. When I finished, I was exhausted, slumped back against the cushions. Adeline, he said softly, there is a term for what you are describing. It is not filial piety, it is coercive control. It involves gaslighting, making you doubt your own reality. It involves financial abuse, and it relies on training you to believe that your only value lies in your utility. He looked me in the eye. You are not a bad daughter. You are a hostage who has been convinced she is a volunteer. A hostage. The word rattled around in my head as I drove to work that night. I parked in the hospital lot, the snow crunching under my tires. When I walked into the break room, Brenda, the charge nurse who had been working there since before I was born, was making coffee. She turned to greet me, and her smile faltered. I had tried to cover the cut on my lip with concealer, but the hospital lights were unforgiving. The swelling was down, but the bruise had bloomed into a dark, ugly purple and yellow mark on my jawline. "Honey," Brenda said, putting down the coffee pot, "what happened to your face?" My instinct was to lie. I walked into a door. I slipped on the ice. I dropped a chart. But Dr. Russo's voice was still in my head. "You are a hostage." "My stepmother," I said. The words felt foreign, sharp. She hit me, because I answered her phone. Brenda went very still. The air in the break room seemed to change pressure. She walked over to me, her face serious. She did not ask for details. She did not ask what I did to deserve it. "Sit down," she commanded gently. She went to the first aid cabinet and pulled out an ice pack and some antibiotic ointment. Does she have a key to your apartment? No, I said, but she knows where I live. Frank, one of the night security guards, was standing by the vending machine. He was a large man, an ex-Marine, who usually spent his shifts reading paperback westerns. He had heard me. He turned around, a bag of pretzels in his hand. He looked at my face, then at Brenda. If anyone comes looking for you tonight, Adeline, Frank said, his voice deep and rumbling, you let me know. Nobody comes on this floor unless they are a patient or staff. I do not care if it is the Pope. I do not care if it is your daddy. They do not get past the desk. I looked at Frank. I looked at Brenda, who was gently dabbing ointment on my lip with a tenderness my father had not shown me in 10 years. Thank you, I whispered, fighting back tears. You are one of ours, Brenda said firmly. We look out for our own. One of ours. The next morning, I pulled into my apartment complex. I saw Mrs. Higgins, my next-door neighbor, struggling to get her mail from the box. She was 78 years old, a widow who lived for her cats and her mystery novels. I got out of the car and walked over. Let me get that for you. Mrs. Higgins. She smiled, her face wrinkling in 1,000 kind lines. Oh, thank you, dear. My arthritis is acting up with this cold. I handed her the stack of envelopes. Then, I took a deep breath. Mrs. Higgins, I have a favor to ask. It is a bit strange. She looked at me, her eyes sharp and intelligent behind her bifocals. I have seen a lot of strange things in 70 years. Try me. I am expecting some legal documents from a lawyer, and I am worried. I am worried my family might try to take them from my mailbox while I'm at work. They have a spare key to the mailbox building. Mrs. Higgins looked at my bruised lip. She did not say a word about it, but I saw her register it. Her expression hardened, not at me, but at the invisible threat. I sit by my window all day. Adeline, she said, I see everything. You give me a list of what you are expecting. I will get the mail the moment the postman comes, and if I see that white SUV you told me belongs to your stepmother, I will call the police. I have been dying to report a suspicious vehicle. She patted my arm. Her hand was frail, but her grip was surprisingly strong. You know, she said softly, I watched you carry my groceries up 3 flights of stairs last week. I watched you dig my car out of the snow last month. That is what family does. Real family does not ask you to destroy yourself just to keep them warm. I stood there in the cold hallway, surrounded by the smell of old carpet and cooking onions, and I felt a wall forming around me. It was not a wall of isolation. It was a wall of protection. Alvarez, Dr. Russo, Brenda, Frank, Mrs. Higgins. They were a ragtag group, a lawyer, a shrink, a nurse, a guard, and a grandmother. But in that moment, they felt stronger than the wealthy, polished dynasty Valerie had built. They were my army. I went into my apartment and locked the deadbolt. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat on my couch, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was the family group chat. Valerie, the cleaning crew canceled for the post-party cleanup tomorrow. I need you to come over at 8 in the morning to handle the living room and the patio. There is wine on the rug, and the recycling needs to go out. Do not be late. I stared at the message. My stomach clenched. The old reflex kicked in. The panic, the need to fix it, the fear of her anger. My hands started to sweat. I could hear her voice in my head, calling me useless, calling me ungrateful. If I don't go, she will scream. If I don't go, Dad will be disappointed. If I don't go, there will be hell to pay. I picked up the phone. I started to type, Okay, I will be there. Then I stopped. I looked at the bruise in the mirror. I looked at the business card Mrs. Alvarez had given me. I thought about Frank standing guard at the hospital doors. I deleted the text. My heart was racing so fast I thought I might pass out. This was it. This was the line. I typed a new message. No, I am not coming. You will have to find someone else. I stared at the send button. It looked like a trigger. I pressed it. The phone buzzed. I flinched. Then it buzzed again. and again. I did not pick it up. I let it buzz. I sat there, breathing in and out. 1 minute passed, 5 minutes passed, 10 minutes. The buzzing stopped. The roof did not collapse. The police did not kick down my door. The sun did not go out. I was still here. I was still Adeline. I was sitting in my quiet apartment, drinking my tea. For the first time in 10 years, I had said no, and I had survived. I reached out and picked up the phone. There were 5 missed calls from Valerie and 3 angry texts demanding an explanation. I did not open them. Instead, I muted the conversation. A strange sensation washed over me. It felt like cold water clearing away mud. The guilt was there, yes, gnawing at the edges of my mind. But beneath the guilt, there was something else. Something I had not felt since I was 19 years old. It was peace. I took a sip of tea. It was still warm. No, I whispered to the empty room, testing the word on my tongue. It was the most beautiful word I had ever spoken. The silence that followed my refusal to clean Valerie's mess did not last long. It was the calm before a calculated artillery barrage. I had expected shouting. I had expected my father to show up at my door. But I had forgotten that Valerie preferred to fight her wars with whispers before she brought out the heavy guns. It started on Tuesday afternoon, 24 hours after I sent the text saying no. I was at the grocery store, buying tea and oranges. When my phone rang, it was my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister. We had not spoken in 3 months, mostly because Valerie had slowly cut off my access to that side of the family by forgetting to invite them to holidays or telling them I was too busy working to talk. "Adeline?" Linda's voice was dripping with a syrupy, terrified concern that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Oh, thank God you answered. Are you safe? Are you at home?" I stopped in the middle of the cereal aisle. "I am at the grocery store. Aunt Linda, why?" "Valerie called me," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She was crying. "Adeline, she said you have been acting erratic. She said you cut off contact and threatened to hurt yourself. She thinks you are having a breakdown well, she implied it was like what your mother went through at the end." My hand gripped the handle of the shopping cart so hard my knuckles turned white. My mother had died of an aneurysm. She did not have a breakdown. She had a medical emergency. Valerie was rewriting history to suit her narrative of genetic instability. "I am fine, Linda," I said, my voice cold and flat. "I am working full-time. I am paying my bills. Valerie is lying because I refused to clean her house for free yesterday." "Oh, honey," Linda sighed, the sound of someone who has already chosen a side. "Denial is part of the illness. Valerie said you would say that. She said you are paranoid. She's just worried about you. She wants to get you help before you do something you cannot take back." I realized then that it did not matter what I said. The trap had been sprung. If I got angry, I was manic. If I defended myself, I was paranoid. If I stayed silent, I was catatonic. "I have to go," I said. "Adeline, please let us help." I hung up. I blocked the number. My heart was pounding. Not with fear, but with a dark, simmering rage. She was isolating me. She was burning the bridges to my extended family so that when she made her move for guardianship, there would be nobody left to object. 2 hours later, my father called. I stared at the screen. "Dad." I picked up. I had to know how deep the rot went. "Adeline," he said. He sounded exhausted. He sounded like a man who had been listened to a 3-hour lecture on why his daughter was a failure. "Hello, Dad." "Why are you doing this to her?" he asked. There was no greeting, just the accusation. "She has been crying all day. She just wants to help you. She loves you. Adeline, why do you have to be so difficult?" "She hit me." "Dad," I said. "She hit me in the face because I answered a phone call from a lawyer discussing a trust fund you told me did not exist." There was a pause, a long, heavy silence on the line. For a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, the truth would penetrate the fog. Then he sighed. "You are imagining things again. She told me you tripped. You were hysterical about some spam call. Look, Adeline, we are willing to overlook this episode. We know you are stressed. Just come over. Apologize to Valerie for scaring her, and we can get you an appointment with her doctor. She knows a good psychiatrist. Her doctor, I repeated. The one who prescribes her sleeping pills? He is a family friend, Mark snapped, his voice hardening. Stop being paranoid. Your mother-in-law is the only one fighting for you right now. Do not make her sad anymore. I cannot take the stress. Adeline, my heart cannot take it. The guilt card, the ace in the hole. I am sorry your heart is bad. Dad, I said, but I am not coming over, and I am not seeing her doctor. I hung up before he could reply. I sat in my car in the parking lot, watching the snow fall. I felt a piece of my soul detach and float away. It was the piece that still believed my father would protect me. He was gone. He was just a ventriloquist's dummy now, speaking with Valerie's voice. But the family front was just the distraction. The real attack came the next morning at work. I was at the nurse's station, charting a patient's vitals, when the unit secretary told me that Mrs. Caldwell, the director of nursing, wanted to see me in her office immediately. The hospital was my sanctuary. It was the one place where I was competent, respected, and in control. As I walked down the long hallway to the administrative wing, I felt a sick dread coiling in my stomach. I knocked and entered. Mrs. Caldwell was a formidable woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She was looking at her computer screen with a frown. "Sit down, Adeline," she said. She did not smile. I sat. I kept my back straight. I folded my hands in my lap to hide the trembling. "I received an email this morning," Mrs. Caldwell began, turning her monitor slightly so I could not see it, but glancing at a printed paper on her desk. It was sent to the hospital board, the HR department, and myself. It is from a concerned community member associated with the Hayes Foundation charity. Valerie's charity, or rather, the charity she used as a social ladder. The email alleges that you have been exhibiting signs of severe mental instability, Mrs. Caldwell continued, her eyes scanning the paper. It claims you are suffering from manic episodes, that you are abusing prescription access, and that you are a danger to patients. It suggests we place you on immediate administrative leave for public safety. The room spun. This was it. This was the nuclear option. If I lost my job, I lost my income. If I lost my income, I looked financially unstable. If I looked unstable, the guardianship was guaranteed. I took a deep breath. I remembered Dr. Russo. I remembered the folder on my cloud drive. "Mrs. Caldwell," I said, my voice steady. "Does the email mention that the vice president of that charity is my stepmother, Valerie Stevens?" Mrs. Caldwell paused. She looked up over her reading glasses. "It does not. It is signed by a Sarah Jenkins." "Sarah Jenkins is Valerie's tennis partner," I said. "And Valerie Stevens is currently under investigation for misappropriating funds from my grandmother's estate. I am the whistleblower." Mrs. Caldwell raised an eyebrow. She was a nurse before she was an administrator. She knew how to triage facts. I reached into my bag. I did not bring the financial evidence. That was for the lawyers. I brought the medical evidence. I slid a sealed envelope across the desk. "This is a certified letter from Dr. Anthony Russo, a forensic psychologist," I said. "I saw him 3 days ago. It details a complete mental health evaluation. It states that I am cognitively sound, emotionally stable, and fully fit for duty. It also notes that I am currently the victim of a campaign of coercive control and harassment by my family." Mrs. Caldwell opened the envelope. She read the letter. She read it twice. Then she looked at the email on her desk. She picked up the paper with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated waste. "This email accuses you of drug abuse," she said bluntly. "Are you willing to take a talk screen right now?" "I will take one every day for the next year if you want," I said. "I have nothing to hide." Mrs. Caldwell leaned back. The frown softened, replaced by a look of professional fury. Hospitals hate liability, but they hate outside interference even more. "Adeline," she said. You are one of my best floor nurses. You have never had a complaint in 7 years. This email, she tapped it. This reads like a personal vendetta. The language is emotional, not clinical. She shredded the paper. The sound of the machine tearing the lies into confetti was the best sound I had heard all week. I am sending you down to the lab for a standard screen, just to cover our bases for the legal file, she said. But I am also flagging your personnel file. No external calls or emails regarding your status are to be entertained. If this Sarah Jenkins or anyone else contacts us again, they will be directed to the hospital's legal counsel for harassment. She stood up and offered me her hand. Go back to your patients, Adeline, and if they show up here, you call security. I walked out of her office. I did not collapse. I did not cry. I felt hardened, like steel that had just been quenched in oil. They had tried to take my livelihood, and they had failed. But Valerie was not done. That night, lying in bed, my phone lit up. It was a text from Valerie. She had abandoned the group chat. She had abandoned the pretense of the caring mother. You think you are clever because you ignored your father? You are sick. Adeline, we tried to do this the nice way. We tried to protect your reputation. But if you are going to be stubborn, we will have to take measures to save you from yourself. A second text followed immediately. I have spoken to Judge Miller. He agrees that a young woman with your history of erratic financial behavior needs supervision. We are filing for emergency temporary conservatorship on Monday. It is for your own good. We will manage your accounts until you are well again. Do not fight this, or you will end up with nothing. She named the judge, Judge Miller, a man who had been at their dinner parties, a man who had eaten her roast beef and laughed at my father's jokes. The threat was explicit. Emergency temporary conservatorship. That was the legal weapon. It was ex parte, meaning they could go to a judge without me even being there, claim I was in immediate danger of bankrupting myself, and get a freeze order on my life before I even woke up on Monday morning. My hands shook as I screenshotted the messages. I forwarded them to Mrs. Alvarez. She just admitted to judicial influence. I typed, she named the judge. 5 minutes later, Alvarez called me. It was 10 at night. Did you see the text? I asked, my voice tight. I saw it, Alvarez said. Her voice was grim but energized. She made a mistake, a big one. She just implicated a sitting judge in a conspiracy before a case is even filed. Adeline, listen to me carefully. Do not reply. Do not engage. Every word she sends you now is a nail in her own coffin. She says they are filing on Monday, I said. Can they do it? They can try, Alvarez said. But we will be there. We are going to file a preemptive motion tomorrow morning, and we are going to attach these texts. If Judge Miller tries to hear this case after she name-dropped him as an ally, I will have him recused for bias so fast his head will spin. She thinks she is flexing her power. She is actually exposing her corruption. She wants to own me, I whispered. It is not just the money. She wants to decide who I am. That is what abusers do, Alvarez said. They try to define reality. They try to tell you that you are crazy so that when you speak the truth, nobody listens. But we have the records. Adeline, we have the receipts. And now we have the threat. What do I do until Monday? I asked. You survive, Alvarez said. You keep your doors locked. You record everything. And you remember that a cornered animal is most dangerous right before it is caught. She knows she is losing control. Adeline, that is why she is escalating. I hung up. I looked at the text again. It is for your own good. That was the phrase that chilled me to the bone. It was the same thing she said when she threw away my mother's clothes. It is for your own good. It was what she said when she made me break up with my college boyfriend because he was not ambitious enough. It is for your own good. She did not just want the $200,000 in the trust. She wanted the satisfaction of breaking me. She wanted to look at me, the daughter of the woman she replaced, and see a broken, dependent creature that she could pity and control. She wanted to erase my mother by erasing me. I got out of bed. I checked the lock on my front door. I checked the lock on the windows. I went to my laptop and opened the folder. Evidence. I added the email from Mrs. Caldwell's office, which she had forwarded to me at my request. I added the screenshots of the texts. I added the recording of Aunt Linda's call. I was not just Adeline the nurse anymore. I was the archivist of my own survival. Valerie thought she was writing a story about a tragic, mentally ill stepdaughter who needed to be saved. She did not realize that I had taken the pen out of her hand. I was writing a different story now. It was a story about a woman who woke up. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. My hand was steady. Let them file on Monday. Let them walk into court with their expensive suits and their connections. Let them try to tell the world I was crazy. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. The bruise on my jaw was fading, turning a sickly yellow, but my eyes were clear. I am not your daughter, I said to the reflection, addressing the woman who was not there. And I am not your victim. I am the witness. And on Monday, the witness was going to testify. Monday morning arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. I sat in Mrs. Alvarez's office again, but this time the atmosphere was different. The air was not filled with the frantic energy of a consultation. It was heavy with the cold, sterile weight of evidence. Mrs. Alvarez had not slept much. I could tell by the dark circles under her eyes and the empty espresso cups on her desk, but her movements were sharp. She looked like a surgeon who had just opened a patient up for a routine procedure and found a tumor the size of a grapefruit. "Adeline, sit down," she said. She did not ask how I was. She did not ask about the weekend. She pushed a stack of papers across the mahogany desk. They were clipped together with a red plastic binder. "My paralegal spent the weekend at the county clerk's office and digging through the probate archives," Alvarez said, her voice low and dangerous. "We found a draft. It has not been filed officially yet, but it was logged in the system as a pre-filing intent by Valerie's legal team on Friday afternoon. This is what they are planning to hit you with." I looked at the cover page. Petition for emergency conservatorship of the person and estate of Adeline Marie Stevens. My name looked strange in that font. It looked criminal. I turned the page. I forced myself to read the legal jargon, the dry, bureaucratic language that was designed to strip a human being of their rights. The petitioner, Valerie Stevens, alleges that the proposed ward, Adeline Stevens, demonstrates a chronic inability to manage financial assets. Evidence A. The document listed a series of transactions. My eyes widened as I recognized them. October 12th. Transfer of $500 to unknown recipient. Subject claimed it was for pharmacy expenses, but provided no medical documentation for herself. September 4th. Withdrawal of $300. Subject claimed it was for education costs for a minor sibling, despite having no legal obligation to the child. I felt the room tilt. "These are the bills I paid for them," I whispered, my voice shaking. The pharmacy expense was Dad's heart medication. The education cost was Leo's tutor. Valerie told me to pay them because she left her wallet at home. "Exactly," Alvarez said. "She used you as a bank, Adeline, and now she is using your generosity as proof that you are financially incontinent. She is framing your assistance as compulsive gifting and irrational spending patterns. She is arguing that you give away all your money because you have a pathological need to be liked, to the point of leaving yourself destitute." I read further. The ward frequently leaves her own bank account overdrawn to fund these irrational impulses, demonstrating a lack of survival instinct. It was brilliant. It was evil, but it was brilliant. She had taken the very thing that made me a good person, my willingness to sacrifice for my family, and twisted it into a symptom of mental illness. "But this is a lie," I said. "I have the texts. I have the proof she asked for this money." "We know that," Alvarez said. "But a judge seeing this ex parte, meaning without you present, would just see a young woman who cannot keep money in her pocket. It would be enough to get a temporary freeze order. But Adeline, that is not the worst part." She pulled the petition away and slid a second document toward me. It was a photocopy of a will, my grandmother's will. "This is the version of the Hayes will that was filed with the probate court 8 years ago." Alvarez said, "Look at the date of the amendment. I looked. August 14th, 2015. Where was your grandmother on August 14th? Alvarez asked. I closed my eyes, searching my memory. That was the summer I was in nursing school. Grandma was dying of bone cancer. She was in hospice, I said. She was at the Gentle Care Facility. She was in a morphine coma for the last 2 weeks of her life. Precisely, Alvarez said. She pointed to the signature at the bottom of the page. It was shaky. It looked like a spider crawl. We had a handwriting expert look at this over the weekend. This signature shows signs of being guided. Someone held her hand. Adeline, or they traced it. I felt sick. What does the amendment say? The original will left the trust fund to you, unconditionally, upon turning 30. This amendment changes the terms. It says the trust is to be administered by Mark and Valerie Stevens indefinitely, to be used for family medical emergencies at their discretion, with you as a tertiary beneficiary only if approved by the trustees. They told me the money was gone, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Dad cried in the kitchen. He told me they spent it all on Mom's hospital bills. That was the lie, Alvarez said. We pulled the trust records. The account is active. Adeline, it has $340,000 in it. It has barely been touched. They could not touch it because the bank requires your signature for withdrawals over a certain amount once you turned 18, or a court order declaring you incapacitated. $340,000. I sat there, numb. All those years I ate instant noodles. All those years I drove a car with no heat. All those years I worked double shifts until my feet bled. The money was there. It was sitting in an account with my name on it, locked behind a wall of lies. Why? I asked. If they have money, Valerie drives a Mercedes. They live in that big house. Why do they need mine? Because they are broke, Alvarez said bluntly. We ran a credit check on your father and Valerie. They are leveraged to the hilt. The house has 3 mortgages on it. The Mercedes is 2 months behind on payments. They are drowning in debt. Adeline, that trust fund is the only liquid cash left. They have been staring at that pot of gold for 10 years, waiting for you to turn 30 so they could trick you into signing it over. But when you started asking questions, when you started seeing a lawyer, they panicked. They realized they could not trick you, so they decided to break you. She opened a folder on her laptop and turned the screen toward me. My investigator found this email, she said. It was sent from Valerie's personal attorney to a real estate developer named North Creek Partners. I read the email. Subject: Hayes Parcel. Sale authorization. Body: We are finalizing the guardianship paperwork for the beneficiary this week. Once the court grants Mrs. Stevens control over the estate, we can proceed with the sale of the 20-acre plot on County Road 9. We will structure the proceeds as a donation to the Hayes Scholarship Fund to avoid immediate taxation, with Mrs. Stevens as the fund director. The Hayes parcel, I whispered. That is the land where Grandma wanted to build a wildlife sanctuary. She made me promise never to sell it. They are selling it for $2 million, Alvarez said, and by funneling it into a scholarship fund that Valerie controls, they can pay themselves a salary to manage the charity. It is money laundering, plain and simple, and you are the only obstacle standing in their way. I felt a cold anger rising in me, displacing the shock. It was not just about money, it was about desecrating the dead. They were forging my dying grandmother's signature. They were selling her dreams. And Dad? I asked, dreading the answer. Does he know? Alvarez sighed. She pulled out one last document. It was a medical power of attorney form. When your father was hospitalized for his heart attack last year, she said, you were there every day, right? I slept in the chair, I said. I managed his meds. I fed him. Look at the date on this, she said. I looked. It was signed 2 days after his admission. While you were feeding him soup, Alvarez said gently, Valerie brought a notary into the room. Your father signed a durable power of attorney granting Valerie full control over his finances and any joint family interests. He essentially signed his vote away. He made himself a silent partner in your destruction. Adeline, he might not be driving the bus, but he is definitely sitting in the passenger seat giving directions. I remembered that day. I remembered Valerie coming in with a friend who she said was just visiting. I had stepped out to get coffee to give them privacy. I had thought I was being respectful. I was actually giving them time to sign the warrant. "There is one more thing," Alvarez said, "and this is the hardest part to hear." She picked up her phone. She tapped the screen. "My investigator has a contact in the courthouse clerk's office. Apparently, Valerie and her lawyer were discussing your case in the hallway after filing the draft petition. They did not realize the security camera near the metal detector's records audio." She pressed play. The sound was tinny, echoing against marble walls, but the voice was unmistakable. It was Valerie. "I am telling you, she is weak." Valerie's voice sneered. "She has always been desperate for a mommy. I just have to push the rejection button a little harder. Send a few more emails to her boss. Isolate her from the aunt. If she cracks, even for a second, if she screams in public, if she throws a phone, we win. Just a few more shoves, and she will be a puppet. And once I have the signature, I am putting her in that state facility in Ohio. It is cheaper than a private clinic." The recording ended. The silence in the office was absolute. A state facility. She did not just want the money. She was planning to institutionalize me. She was planning to lock me away in a warehouse for the mentally ill, medicate me into oblivion, and leave me there to rot while she spent my grandmother's legacy on galas and renovations. I looked at my hands. They were steady. "She thinks I am weak," I said softly. "She is banking on it," Alvarez said. "She is banking on you being the scared little girl who just wants her daddy to love her. She has built this entire plan on the assumption that you will crumble under pressure." I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the gray parking lot. I saw my reflection in the glass. I did not look like a scared little girl. I looked like a woman who had just survived a murder attempt. "She is wrong," I said. I turned back to Alvarez. "She wants a reaction," I said. "She wants me to scream. She wants me to be unstable." "Yes," Alvarez said. "If you confront her violently, you give her the evidence she needs." "Then I will not confront her violently," I said. "I am going to give her exactly what she wants. I am going to give her a performance." Alvarez raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "The gala," I said. "The winter gala. It is tonight. Valerie is getting the Humanitarian of the Year award." "Adeline, staying away is the safest option," Alvarez warned. "No," I said. "If I stay away, she spins the story that I am at home, depressed, hiding. She controls the narrative. But if I go and I am perfectly calm, if I go and I speak the truth—" "It is a risk," Alvarez said. "A massive risk." "I want those documents," I said, pointing to the desk. "I want copies of the forged will. I want the bank statements showing the transfers. I want the email about selling the land. And I want the draft petition where she calls me incompetent." "What are you going to do?" "I am going to introduce the real Adeline Stevens to society," I said. "They think I am a puppet? Fine. Tonight, the puppet cuts the strings." Alvarez looked at me for a long moment. She saw the resolve in my eyes. She saw that the nurse who healed people had left the building, and the daughter who sought justice had taken her place. "Okay," Alvarez said. She reached for the red binder. "If we are doing this, we do it right. I will call Judge Miller's office and file an emergency motion for conflict of interest immediately, just to shake them up, and I will have a process server at the gala. But Adeline, once you walk onto that stage, there is no going back. You are burning the house down." I picked up the file. It felt heavy, like a weapon. "The house was already burning," I said. "I am just making sure everyone sees who is holding the matches." I walked out of the office. The cold air hit my face, but I did not feel it. I was already thinking about my dress. I was thinking about the speech. I was thinking about the look on Valerie's face when she realized that the help had arrived, and I was not there to serve drinks. I was there to serve the papers. The invitation to the winter gala sat on my kitchen counter like a grenade wrapped in silk. It was heavy cardstock, cream-colored with gold embossing. The City Charity Foundation cordially invites you to honor Valerie Stevens, our Compassionate Woman of the Year. I stared at it while sipping my coffee. It was Wednesday, 3 days before the event. The irony was so thick, I could almost taste it. Valerie was being honored for her tireless fundraising efforts, for the thousands of dollars she had donated to local shelters and arts programs. But I looked at my spreadsheet. I knew exactly where those thousands of dollars had come from. They came from the tuition money of a nursing student. They came from the pillaged trust fund of a dead woman. She was buying a halo with stolen gold. Mrs. Alvarez sat opposite me at my small dining table. We had turned my apartment into a war room. "We have 2 choices," Alvarez said, tapping her pen against the table. "We can file the injunction quietly on Monday morning. It stops the guardianship, but it leaves her reputation intact. She will spin it. She will tell everyone you are confused, that it is a misunderstanding. She will play the victim." "And the second choice?" I asked. "We serve her at the gala," Alvarez said. "Publicly, undeniably, we serve her with the lawsuit for fraud, the motion to remove her as trustee, and the temporary restraining order against the assets. We blow the lid off the pressure cooker in front of every donor, judge, and politician in the city." I looked at the invitation again. I thought about the years I had spent in the background of these parties. I remembered holding her purse while she took photos. I remembered fixing her hem in the bathroom while she complained that I was clumsy. I remembered being told to stand in the back so I would not ruin the aesthetic of the family photo. "If we do it at the party," I said slowly, "she cannot gaslight the room. She cannot tell 500 people they are imagining things." "It is nuclear, Adeline," Alvarez warned. "It destroys the family. There is no coming back from this. Your father will be humiliated." "My father signed a power of attorney that let her rob me," I said, my voice steady. "He chose his side. I am choosing mine." "Okay," Alvarez said, a grim smile touching her lips. "Then we need to prepare the battlefield. We cannot just walk in and shout. We need the high ground." The next morning, I put on my best blazer, the one I usually saved for job interviews, and drove to the headquarters of the City Charity Foundation. I did not have an appointment, but I had sent an email to the board of directors at 4 a.m. with the subject line, "Urgent financial discrepancies regarding the Hayes estate and Valerie Stevens." That got their attention. I was ushered into a conference room that smelled of lemon polish and old money. 3 people were waiting for me. There was Mrs. Galloway, the chairwoman, a woman who wore pearls the size of grapes. There was Mr. Henderson, a retired banker who had been one of my grandmother's oldest friends. And there was their legal counsel, a young man who looked like he wished he were anywhere else. "Miss Stevens," Mrs. Galloway began, her tone frosty, "this is highly irregular. We are 48 hours away from the gala. To suggest any impropriety regarding our honoree is, well, it is frankly insulting." "I understand," I said. I did not apologize. I opened my leather portfolio. "I am not here to insult anyone. I am here to save you from a potential scandal that could bankrupt your reputation." I slid the first document across the polished mahogany table. It was the side-by-side comparison of my bank statements and the foundation's donor list. On November 4th, Valerie Stevens is listed as donating $5,000 to your Coats for Kids drive, I said calmly. On November 3rd, $5,000 was transferred from my personal savings account to a joint account Valerie controls, ostensibly to pay for emergency roof repairs on my father's home. There were no roof repairs. I have the contractor's statement confirming no work was done. Mrs. Galloway picked up the paper. Her frown deepened. I slid the second document. This is a draft of a guardianship petition Valerie filed with the courts last week. In it, she claims I am financially incompetent because I, quote, give away large sums of money without explanation. She is using the money she solicited from me to prove I am crazy, while simultaneously accepting awards for donating that same money in her name. Mr. Henderson reached for the papers. His hands, usually steady, were trembling slightly. He looked at the guardianship draft. Then he looked at me. "Adeline," he said, his voice rough. She told us you were struggling. She said the trust fund was empty because your mother's illness drained it. She said she was supporting you. The trust fund has $340,000 in it, Mr. Henderson, I said, and she is currently trying to sell the Hayes wildlife parcel, the land Grandma made you promise to protect, to a developer for $2 million. She plans to funnel the proceeds into a scholarship fund that she directs. I produced the email from the developer. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a bomb having just been defused, leaving everyone aware of how close they came to destruction. Mr. Henderson looked at the email. He looked at the signature at the bottom. "Margaret Hayes told me on her deathbed that land was for the birds," he whispered. "She made me promise." He looked up, and there was fire in his eyes. "She is selling it for strip malls?" "She needs the money," I said. "They are broke. Mr. Henderson, the gala, the awards, the image. It is all a smokescreen to hide the fact that they are drowning in debt and looting my inheritance to stay afloat." Mrs. Galloway looked pale. "If this comes out, if the press finds out we honored a woman who is defrauding her stepdaughter—" "The press will find out," I said, "because my lawyer is filing criminal fraud charges on Monday. The only question is whether the foundation is seen as a victim of her deception or an accomplice." The legal counsel cleared his throat. "What do you want, Miss Stevens? Do you want us to cancel the gala?" "No," I said. "If you cancel it now, she spins the story. She says she is sick. She plays the martyr. I want the gala to happen." I leaned forward. "I want to attend, not as a server, not as the unstable daughter sitting by the kitchen. I want a seat at table 1, and I want 5 minutes on the microphone." Mrs. Galloway looked horrified. "You want to make a speech?" "I want to ask a question," I corrected. "I want to ask the city what happens when charity becomes a cover for abuse. I will not scream. I will not curse. I will just tell the truth. And then my lawyer will have a process server hand her the court orders." Mrs. Galloway looked like she was about to refuse, but Mr. Henderson slammed his hand down on the table. "Let her speak," he said. "If half of this is true, Valerie Stevens has made fools of us all. She looked me in the eye and cried about Margaret's legacy while she was forging her signature. Let the girl speak." Mrs. Galloway pursed her lips. She looked at the evidence again. "We cannot officially endorse a disruption," she said carefully. "However, if there were to be an unscheduled addition to the program, and if security were instructed not to intervene—" "That is all I ask," I said. I walked out of that meeting with a guest pass for table 1 and a silent alliance with the most powerful people in the room. But I knew the hardest part was still ahead. I had to make sure Valerie could not pull the ripcord before the plane crashed. I drove straight to the hospital. I went to the security office and found Frank. "I need a favor," I said. "A big one." I gave him a copy of the restraining order draft Alvarez had prepared. "Valerie might try to come here, or she might call and say I have been committed. I need you to make sure that unless a police officer stands here with a warrant, nobody touches me. And if she shows up, I want her trespassed." Frank nodded, his face grim. "She steps 1 foot on this property. She leaves in cuffs. Adeline, you have my word." Next, I drove to Leo's school. I met with the principal. This was trickier. I had no legal standing with Leo, but I had been the one signing his permission slips for 3 years because Valerie was always too busy. "I am worried about a domestic dispute escalating," I told the principal, keeping it vague but urgent. "If my father or stepmother tries to pull Leo out of school early tomorrow or Monday, please, just call me. Just let me know he is safe. I am afraid they might try to use him as leverage." The principal, a kind woman who had seen me at every parent-teacher conference while Valerie was absent, nodded. "I will put a flag on his file. Adeline, we will verify any pickup request." Finally, I went to Mrs. Higgins' apartment. "I am going to a party tonight," I told her. "If I do not come back by midnight, Or if you see police cars here without me, call this number." I handed her Alvarez's personal cell number. "You look like you are going to a funeral," Mrs. Higgins said, eyeing my somber face. "No," I said. "I am going to an exorcism." Saturday night arrived. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my bedroom. For years. My wardrobe for these events had been dictated by Valerie. Wear something muted. Adeline, wear gray, wear navy, don't draw focus. Tonight, I was not wearing gray. I had gone to a boutique downtown and spent $400, money I had saved by not paying Valerie's emergency bills this week. I bought a dress that was simple, architectural, and sharp. It was a deep, emerald green silk that draped over my body like armor. It had a high neck and a low back. It was elegant. It was adult. It was powerful. I pulled my hair back into a sleek, low bun. I applied lipstick that was a shade darker than I usually dared. I looked at myself. The bruise on my jaw was faint now, easily covered by foundation. But I knew it was there. I could feel it throbbing slightly. A phantom reminder of why I was doing this. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Alvarez. "The judge signed the temporary freeze order on the trust an hour ago based on the fraud evidence. The process server is in position. He is posing as a waiter. He will move when you give the signal." I took a deep breath. "I am ready," I typed back. I grabbed my clutch. Inside, I did not have a checkbook to pay my father's debts. I did not have a stain remover pen to fix Valerie's spills. I had a folded copy of my grandmother's real will and a USB drive containing every email, every text, and every recording. I drove to the hotel. The valet looked at my rusted Honda Civic with disdain, but when I stepped out in the emerald dress, his expression changed. I held my head high. "Keep it close," I told him, handing him a $10 tip. "I might need to leave in a hurry." I walked into the ballroom. The noise hit me first. The clinking of crystal, the murmur of hundreds of voices, the soft jazz from the band. The room was a sea of black tuxedos and glittering gowns. The air smelled of expensive perfume and roasted lamb. I saw them immediately. Table 1 was front and center, right before the stage. Valerie was there, wearing a shimmering silver gown that made her look like an ice queen. She was laughing, her head thrown back, holding court with the mayor on her left and my father on her right. My father looked handsome in his tuxedo, but he looked tired. He was drinking scotch, his eyes scanning the room nervously. Was he looking for me? Was he hoping I would show up to fix something? Or was he hoping I would stay away so he could pretend I did not exist? I did not go to the service entrance. I did not go to the back of the room. I walked straight down the center aisle. Heads turned. People whispered. I was usually the invisible girl, the one in the sensible cardigan holding the coats. Tonight, I was walking like I owned the building. I reached table 1. Valerie saw me first. Her smile froze. Her eyes went wide, darting up and down my dress. For a second, I saw genuine fear flicker behind the mask. She had expected me to be cowering at home, terrified by her threats of guardianship. She had not expected this. "Adeline," she hissed, her voice low so the mayor wouldn't hear. "What are you doing here? I thought I told you." "I am here for the celebration." "Valerie," I said, my voice carrying clearly over the music. "It is a big night. I wouldn't miss it." I pulled out the chair directly across from her, the seat reserved for the special guest that Mr. Henderson had ensured was vacant. My father choked on his drink. "Addie, you look—" "I look like a Stevens," I said, sitting down and placing my clutch on the table. "Don't I, Dad?" Valerie's hand gripped her butter knife. Her knuckles were white. "You are making a scene," she whispered furiously. "Get up. You are sitting at the staff table." "No," I said. I picked up the linen napkin and placed it on my lap. "I am done with the staff table, and I think the program is about to start." I looked her in the eye. I let her see the cold, hard resolve in my gaze. I let her see that the fear was gone. "You look nervous." "Valerie," I said softly, "is something wrong?" She glared at me, hatred radiating off her in waves. "If you say one word," she threatened, her voice a serpentine hiss, "if you do anything to embarrass me, I will have you in a straitjacket by morning. The papers are already drafted." "I know," I said. "I read them. They were very creative." Her face went pale. How?" "I know about the trust, Valerie," I whispered. "I know about the land sale. I know about the fake email. I know everything." Before she could respond, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. The MC walked to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," the voice boomed, "please welcome the chairwoman of the City Charity Foundation, Mrs. Elena Galloway." Mrs. Galloway walked to the podium. She looked nervous. She glanced down at our table, her eyes locking with mine for a brief second. She gave a barely perceptible nod. Valerie straightened up. She put the smile back on her face, but it was brittle now, like cracked glass. She reached for my father's hand, squeezing it for support. "Tonight," Mrs. Galloway said, "we are here to honor service, but service is a complex thing. True service is about sacrifice. It is about truth." She paused. This was not the script Valerie had approved. "We have a late addition to our program," Mrs. Galloway continued. "Before we present the award, we have a family member who wishes to share a few words about the reality of the Stevens family legacy. Please welcome Adeline Stevens." The room went silent. Valerie gasped. She turned to my father. "Mark, stop her. She is manic. Stop her." My father looked at me. He looked at the stage. He looked at his wife. He was paralyzed. I stood up. I smoothed my dress. "Sit down," Valerie hissed, grabbing my wrist. Her nails dug into my skin, right into the bruise she had left days ago. I looked at her hand. Then I looked at her face. "Let go," I said. It wasn't a request. It was a command. She was so shocked by the tone that her grip loosened. I pulled my arm away. I walked toward the stairs. The spotlight swung to find me. The light was blinding, hot and white. I could hear the whispers. "Is that the daughter? I thought she was the assistant. She looks stunning. What is happening?" I walked up the steps. I stood behind the podium. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the mayor. I saw the bankers. I saw the society wives who had ignored me for a decade. And in the center, I saw Valerie. She was standing up now, signaling frantically to security. But the security guards, instructed by Mr. Henderson, were standing with their arms crossed, looking at the ceiling. I took a breath. "Good evening," I said. My voice did not shake. "My name is Adeline Stevens. For 10 years, you have known me as the girl who takes your coats and serves your drinks. You have known my stepmother, Valerie, as a philanthropist." I paused. I let the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. "Tonight," I said, "I want to talk about the cost of that philanthropy. I want to talk about who actually pays the bill when the check comes due." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the USB drive. I placed it on the podium. "This," I said, "is the truth." I looked down at Valerie. She was not the Ice Queen anymore. She was a frightened woman watching her castle turn to water. It was time. The ballroom of the Grand Millennial Hotel was a cavern of crystal and velvet, suffocating in its own opulence. The air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the heavy, metallic tang of hairspray. From my vantage point behind the podium, the room looked like an impressionist painting of wealth, swirls of black tuxedos, flashes of diamond jewelry, and the pale, expectant faces of the city's elite. Valerie stood at table 1, right in the center of the spotlight's glare. She had not sat down since I took the stage. She was frozen, her hand still gripping the back of my father's chair, her knuckles white. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming semi-truck, waiting for the impact. My father, Mark, was staring up at me. His mouth was slightly open. He looked confused, as if he had walked into the wrong movie theater. Beside him, my half-brother Leo was playing with his napkin. oblivious to the tension that was vibrating through the room like a high-tension wire about to snap. I placed the USB drive into the port on the side of the lectern. The projection system was linked directly to the massive screen behind me, which had been displaying a looped slideshow of Valerie posing with underprivileged children. "I am not here to give a speech," I said. My voice echoed through the massive hall, amplified by the high-quality sound system. It was steady. It was calm. It was the voice of a nurse calling a time of death. "I am here to correct a record." I pressed the spacebar on the laptop. The image of Valerie smiling at a soup kitchen vanished. In its place, a spreadsheet appeared. It was magnified to a massive scale. The black text sharp against the white background. It was the ledger I had compiled in my apartment. Date, October 12th. Amount, $500. From, Adeline Stevens. Personal savings. To, Valerie Stevens. Joint account. Memo. Pharmacy expenses. Date, November 3rd. Amount, $1,200. From, Adeline Stevens. Personal savings. To, VS Designs. LLC. Memo. Home repairs. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. It started low, like the hum of insects, and grew louder. People were squinting. Glasses were being put on. "For 7 years," I said, "I have been the primary financier of the lifestyle you see on display at Table 1. The dress Mrs. Stevens is wearing tonight costs $4,000. On the day it was purchased, $4,000 was transferred from my student loan repayment fund to the family joint account to cover emergency medical bills for my father." I looked down at Mark. He blinked, looking from me to the screen. I saw him mouth the words, medical bills. He knew he hadn't had any medical bills that month. "Adeline!" Valerie screamed. Her voice cracked, high and desperate. "Cut the mic! Someone cut the mic! She is having a breakdown!" She lunged toward the stage, her silver dress sweeping around her legs. But before she could take 3 steps, Mr. Henderson stood up at Table 1. He was a man of immense gravity in this city, and when he moved, people watched. He held up a hand, palm out, stopping Valerie in her tracks. "Let her finish," Mr. Henderson boomed. He did not need a microphone. Valerie froze, looking at him with betrayal in her eyes. "She is lying! Arthur, she is sick!" "We have reviewed the bank statements, Valerie," Mr. Henderson said, his voice cold enough to freeze the champagne in the buckets. "Sit down." The command was so authoritative that Valerie actually stumbled back, collapsing into her chair as if her strings had been cut. I pressed the spacebar again. The screen changed. Now, it displayed a document. It was the draft of the guardianship petition. Petitioner, Valerie Stevens. Proposed ward, Adeline Stevens. Reason for petition. The ward demonstrates financial incompetence by compulsively giving away her assets, necessitating total control by the petitioner. The gasp from the room was audible. It was a sharp, collective intake of breath. This crowd understood money, but they also understood power, and they recognized a hostile takeover when they saw one. "This document," I said, "was drafted last week. In it, my stepmother argues that because I paid her bills, because I paid for the very charity events she takes credit for, I am mentally unstable. She claims that my generosity is a symptom of insanity. She planned to use my kindness as the legal justification to strip me of my rights and take control of the one thing she has not been able to touch yet." I pressed the key again. The screen filled with the image of my grandmother's will, the real one. "This is the last will and testament of Margaret Hayes." I read, "My grandmother left a trust fund to ensure that her descendants would have education and health care. She did not leave it to fund galas. She did not leave it to buy luxury cars. And she certainly did not leave it to be stolen through a fraudulent guardianship." I looked directly at the camera at the back of the room, knowing the feed was being projected onto the side screens. "I was told this money was gone," I said. "I was told it was spent on my dying mother. For 10 years. I lived in guilt, believing I was a burden, but the money is still there, $340,000. And the only reason Mrs. Stevens has not spent it is because she needed me to be declared incompetent first. Valerie was shaking her head violently. She grabbed Mark's arm. "Mark, do something! She is ruining us! Tell them she is crazy!" My father pulled his arm away. It was a small movement, but on the giant screens, it looked like an earthquake. He pulled his arm away from her and shifted his chair a few inches to the right. He looked up at the screen, staring at the text messages I had displayed next. Text from Valerie to attorney. Make sure you keep the receipts where she pays Mark's bills. We need to frame that as reckless spending. I saw the color drain from my father's face. He was reading the words. He was seeing the architecture of the trap. He realized, finally, that he was the bait. "Is there a doctor in the house?" I asked rhetorically. "Because it seems we have a severe case of fraud." At that moment, the double doors at the side of the ballroom opened. A man in a waiter's uniform walked in, but he was not carrying a tray. He was carrying a thick manila envelope. He walked with purpose, ignoring the hushed whispers of the guests. He walked straight to table 1. He stopped in front of Valerie. "Valerie Stevens?" he asked loudly. Valerie stared at him, her chest heaving. "Get away from me!" "You are served," the man said. He dropped the heavy envelope onto her plate, right on top of the untouched filet mignon. "This is a temporary restraining order regarding the assets of the Hayes Trust," the man announced, his voice carrying to the nearby tables. "And a summons to appear in Superior Court on Monday morning regarding the investigation into elder abuse and fraud." The flashbulbs started. It began with one pop, then another, and suddenly the room was a lightning storm of white light. The society photographers, who had been bored all night, smelled blood in the water. They rushed forward, lenses trained on table 1. Valerie stood up. Her face was contorted, a mask of pure, unfiltered rage. The facade of the benevolent philanthropist cracked and fell away, leaving only the predator underneath. "You ungrateful little brat!" she screamed. The sound tore through the room, shrill and ugly. "I gave you a home," she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "I fed you. I clothed you. You would be nothing without me. You are a parasite, just like your mother." The room recoiled. The mask was not just off, it was shattered. I did not scream back. I did not flinch. I stood at the podium, tall in my emerald dress, and I looked down at her with a pity that must have burned worse than hatred. "You did not give me a home, Valerie," I said into the microphone. "You just lived in my father's house, and as of tonight, I am evicting you from my life." I stepped back from the podium. The room was in chaos. Mrs. Galloway was on stage now, trying to take the microphone to salvage the event, but nobody was listening. The foundation board members were huddled in a corner with their lawyers. The guests were standing, whispering, pointing. I walked down the stairs. I did not walk toward table 1. I walked toward the exit. As I passed the tables, people pulled back to let me through. They did not look at me with the dismissal they used to show the help. They looked at me with a mixture of shock and respect. I heard snippets of conversation as I passed. "Did you see the texts? The grandmother's will. I heard she forged the car loan." I reached the back of the room. I turned around for one last look. Valerie was still screaming, but her voice was being drowned out by the noise of the crowd. Security guards, the ones Frank had spoken to, were moving in, not to arrest her, but to escort her out before she caused a riot. My father was sitting alone at the table. He had his head in his hands. Leo was looking at him, then at me. I caught my brother's eye. I gave him a small, sad smile and nodded. "I will come for you later." The nod said, "But not tonight." I pushed open the heavy double doors and walked out into the lobby. The silence of the hallway was jarring after the cacophony of the ballroom. I walked past the concierge, past the valet stand, and out into the biting winter night. The cold air hit my face, sharp and clean. It felt like a baptism. I walked to my rusted Honda Civic. The valet saw me coming and ran to get the keys. His eyes wide. He had heard the commotion inside. "Miss Stevens," he said, handing me the keys with a newfound deference. "Is everything all right?" I looked back at the hotel. I could see the flashing lights of the police cars arriving. Mrs. Higgins had made the call. Right on schedule. "Yes," I said. "Everything is exactly as it should be." I got into my car. I looked at the passenger seat where the empty USB drive lay. It was just a piece of plastic, but it had weighed more than the world. Now, it was light. I started the engine. My phone buzzed. It was a text from the family group chat. I looked at it. Valerie removed Mark from the conversation. Valerie removed Leo from the conversation. Valerie left the conversation. I smiled. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. I did not look in the rearview mirror. I did not need to see the wreckage. I knew exactly what burning bridges looked like, and the fire was beautiful. I drove toward the highway. For the first time in my life, I did not know where I was going next. I did not have a list of chores. I did not have a debt to pay. I did not have a role to play. The road stretched out ahead of me, dark and open and terrifyingly free. "My name is Adeline Stevens," I said aloud to the empty car. And for the first time, the name belonged to me. 3 weeks after the gala, the silence in the conference room of the downtown law firm was heavy enough to crush a person. It was a different kind of silence than the one I had grown up with. The silence in my father's house had been a weapon, a prelude to an explosion. This silence was sterile. It was the sound of consequences. I sat on one side of the long glass table. Mrs. Alvarez was next to me, her posture rigid, a stack of files organized with military precision in front of her. On the other side sat my father, Mark, and my younger brother, Leo. There was an empty chair next to my father. It was the chair reserved for Valerie, but Valerie was not there. She was currently under a temporary restraining order that prohibited her from being within 500 feet of me or any assets related to the Hayes Trust. She was also dealing with the district attorney's office regarding 3 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of elder abuse. Her absence in the room felt like a physical presence, a ghost that we were all trying to exorcise. A court-appointed mediator sat at the head of the table, looking over his glasses at the assembly. "We are here to finalize the settlement regarding the petition for guardianship and the mismanagement of the Hayes estate," the mediator said. His voice was dry, devoid of emotion. "The forensic accounting report has been completed." He slid a thick binder across the table toward my father. My father looked older. In the 3 weeks since the gala, he seemed to have aged 10 years. His shoulders were slumped, and he wore a suit that looked slightly too large for him, as if he had shrunk inside his own life. He did not reach for the binder. He just stared at it. "Mr. Stevens?" Mrs. Alvarez said, her voice sharp. "Please open it to page 4. My father's hand trembled as he opened the cover. "As you can see," Alvarez continued, "the narrative that the Hayes Trust was depleted by your late wife's medical bills was a complete fabrication. The trust principal of $340,000 has remained largely untouched in a high-yield account since 2012. The only withdrawals were small, strategic amounts taken out by Valerie Stevens for administrative fees that went directly into her personal checking account." Leo, who was sitting next to Dad, looked over at the binder. He was 13 years old enough to understand money, but perhaps too young to understand betrayal. He was wearing his school uniform, his tie loosened. He looked from the numbers to me. "Adeline paid for my hockey gear," Leo said quietly. It was the first time he had spoken. My father flinched. "Yes," Alvarez said, turning to Leo. "Adeline paid for your hockey gear. She paid for your tutor. She paid for the groceries. She paid for your father's heart medication. And while she was doing that, there was a fund specifically designated for family welfare that your mother, Valerie, refused to access because she wanted to keep the balance high enough to steal later." The room went quiet again. "Mark," I said. My father looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Did you know?" I asked. It was the question that had been haunting me. "Did you know the money was there?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at the empty chair where Valerie should have been. For a moment, I saw him try to summon the old excuses, the ones Valerie had programmed into him. She handles the finances. I am not good with numbers. She was just trying to save for the future. But the binder was right there. The lie was dead on the table. He cleared his throat. I didn't look. I never looked. That is not an answer, I said. He slumped further. I knew she moved money around, he whispered. I knew she was aggressive, but Adeline, I just wanted peace. I wanted a happy house. Every time I asked questions, she would scream. She would say I didn't trust her. So I stopped asking. I just signed what she put in front of me. You traded my life for your peace, I said. The words hung in the air, stark and brutal. You let her call me crazy, I continued, my voice steady. You let her file a petition to take away my rights. You let her hit me, all because you didn't want to have an argument with your wife. My father put his head in his hands. He began to weep. It was a quiet, pathetic sound. I am so sorry, he sobbed. I was weak. I was so weak. Leo looked at his father. Then he looked at me. For years. Leo had treated me with a casual indifference. I was just the sister who fixed things, the background character in the movie of his life. But now, looking at our father crying and the sister who had burned down the lie, his expression changed. It shifted from confusion to a dawning realization. He realized that the comfort of his life had been purchased with my misery. He realized that the sister he ignored was the only one who had actually protected him. She told me you were mean, Leo said, his voice cracking. Mom said you were jealous of us. I know, Leo, I said softly. I wasn't jealous. I was just tired. The mediator cleared his throat. Let us move to the resolution. The court has granted Adeline Stevens full executorship of the Hayes Trust. Effective immediately, Valerie Stevens is removed as trustee for cause. Furthermore, the court has issued a permanent injunction preventing Valerie Stevens from accessing any accounts held by Mark Stevens without a countersignature from a court-appointed monitor. Alvarez slid a document toward my father. This is a consent decree, she said. It states that you acknowledge the fraud. It states that you agree to repay Adeline the $45,000 she spent on your household expenses over the last 3 years. We are willing to structure a payment plan, given your financial situation, but the debt is recognized. My father looked at the paper. I will sign it, he said. I will sign anything. And there is one more thing, I said. I placed a single sheet of paper on the table. This is not a court document, I said. This is my document. My father looked at it. I am setting boundaries. Dad, I said. Effective today. I am not your banker. I am not your nurse. I am not your maid. I will not pay your bills. I will not clean your house. I will not solve your problems. I leaned forward. And if you want to see me, I said, if you want to have a relationship with your daughter, you and Leo are required to attend family therapy with a counselor of my choosing, without Valerie. Therapy? My father asked, blinking. Yes, I said, because you are broken, Dad, and you broke our family. If you want to fix it, you need professional help. I am done trying to fix you myself. He looked at the paper. He looked at the terms. They were strict. They were cold. They were necessary. Okay, he whispered. Okay, Addie. We spent another hour signing papers. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was the sound of chains breaking. With every signature, I felt lighter. I was signing my name, Adeline Stevens. But it felt different now. It wasn't the name of a victim. It was the name of a woman who owned herself. When the meeting ended, the mediator left, and Alvarez went to the reception desk to make copies. I was left alone in the room with my father and Leo. Leo stood up. He walked over to me. He looked awkward, his hands in his pockets. I am sorry I didn't help with the dishes, he said. It was a small thing, a childish thing, but it was the only way he knew how to apologize for a decade of complicity. It is okay. Leo, I said, you were a kid, but you are growing up now. You have to pay attention. I will, he said. I promise. My father stood up slowly. He looked at the empty chair one last time, then turned to me. Adeline, he said. I looked at him. I saw the man who used to carry me on his shoulders. I saw the man who had let another woman destroy me. I felt a pang of love, sharp and painful. But it was no longer a blinding light. It was just a feeling, one of many. Am I still your family? He asked. His voice was fragile, terrified of the answer. I looked at him. I thought about the nights I cried myself to sleep. I thought about the slap in the kitchen. I thought about the gala. You are my father, I said. That will never change. But family? I paused. Family is the people who show up for you, I said. You didn't show up, Dad. You hid. He flinched as if I had slapped him. But, I continued, I am willing to give you a chance to earn that title back. But you have to step out of her shadow. If you go back to that house and let her tell you that I am the villain, if you let her rewrite what happened in this room today, then we are done, for good. He nodded, tears streaming down his face again. I understand. I am proud of you. Adeline, you are so strong. You are just like your mother. No, I said firmly. Mom died because she had an aneurysm. I survived because I fought back. I am not like her. I am me. I picked up my purse. I didn't hug him. Not yet. That was something he had to earn. I walked out of the conference room. Mrs. Alvarez was waiting for me in the lobby. She handed me a file folder containing the finalized orders. You did good, kid, she said, a rare smile touching her lips. You did real good. Thank you, Maria, I said, for believing me. I didn't believe you, she corrected. I believed the evidence. You were the one who was brave enough to collect it. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the office building and stepped out onto the sidewalk. It had been winter when this started. The air had been bitter and gray. But today, the wind had shifted. There was a crispness to it, a hint of thawing earth and new green things. It was the beginning of spring. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cold, clean air. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I looked at the screen. For years, my phone had been a source of terror. Every vibration was a demand. Every ring was a crisis. The family group chat had been a cage I carried in my pocket. I scrolled down. The old family chat, Stephen's family updates, was buried at the bottom of the list, silent and archived. At the top of the screen were new notifications. A text from Brenda at the hospital. Shift schedule is out. Put you down for the day shift next week. Let's grab lunch. A text from Mrs. Higgins. The mailman came. No white SUV today. Also, I made cookies. A text from Frank, the security guard. Quiet night at the desk. You are safe. And a text from Leo. Thanks, Addie. I stood there on the busy street corner, people rushing past me with their coffees and their briefcases, and I smiled. It wasn't a triumphant smile. It was a quiet one. It was the smile of someone who had just put down a heavy backpack after a 10-mile hike. My phone rang in my hand. It wasn't a text. It was a call. I looked at the screen. It was a number I didn't recognize. Maybe a telemarketer. Maybe the pharmacy. Maybe a new friend. My heart didn't race. My stomach didn't clench. My hands didn't shake. I pressed the green button and lifted the phone to my ear. Hello? I said. For the first time, when I heard the phone ring, I didn't fear whose orders were on the other end. I only felt that it was my new life calling my name. Thank you so much for listening to Adeline's story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please leave a comment below with your country or city, and let's share our thoughts on this journey. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of justice and resilience, please make sure to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach more people. Your support means the world to us.